Now, detonate the reality bomb!
I will build a great, great wall.
Some alien race to come down and threaten us.
Is the singularity near?
The truth is out there.
The military-industrial complex.
The 7 mountains of the influencers of culture.
To be as gods, you know.
Change has come to America.
Catapult of propaganda.
From a secure location on top of the ridge in the heart of the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, this is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
The notion that Scripture and science are mutually incompatible is a lie straight from the pit of hell. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Joining me this week is a new guest to our program. And before we get too far in, I need to apologize for the quality of the audio in this week's broadcast, because as I was getting ready to record the interview via video, which I usually do, discovered at the last minute that Skype, thank you Microsoft, had pushed through a new update which broke the plugin I've been using for more than a dozen years to record conversations on Skype. Well, that wasn't time to do the update. I thought everything was set correctly. In fact, it was set correctly when I went back and checked all of the preferences in Skype, but the update to Skype had broken the plugin. So we're only getting video from our guest's side, and the audio, even though it was set to come off of this nice broadcast quality microphone here, actually came through the internal mic on my PowerBook. Not the worst audio in the world, but it's not up to standard. So if you're listening to this on the podcast at VFTB.net, rather than watching the video at YouTube.com/Derek P. Gilbert, you're going to hear what sounds like really bad audio compared to what we've been able to do over the last couple of years. So anyway, apologies for that up front. But sadly, things have been busy enough, and this is not a complaint because I'm glad to be this busy, that didn't have time to re-record the interview, and I think the content is worth hearing anyway. This young man is a gentleman I met in my previous career as an outside sales rep. He is working in a field that requires his background in technology and design. He's also got a background in biology, which is attractive to me because, the woman I married has got a background in biology, so I've been exposed to a little bit of that over the last couple of decades. But finding somebody who understands that you're training in basic science, biology, and applied science, which is what we call engineering, is not incompatible with the Bible, but in fact reinforces the truth claims of Christianity, is something that I think is really important. We don't teach enough apologetics in our churches these days. And so without further ado, this week's guest, we welcome Daniel Corrier to the program. His website is iapologia.com, iapologia.com. If you can't spell that, don't worry, it's in the show notes. We welcome Daniel Corrier to the program. Daniel, it's good to talk with you again after all this time.
Good to talk to you too, Derek. Great to be on your show here.
We met as I made a sales call on your employer, and I had to learn over the 3 years that I worked in outside sales, actually almost 4 years in outside sales, that there were times it was a mission field, and I didn't really realize it. There were times I would run into fellow believers, and I don't know how we knew, but it seemed like every time when I went into a place of business where the gentleman or woman that I was calling on was a believer, we would figure it out. We would just kind of sense it over the course of the conversation. It wouldn't take very long to figure that out either. The gentleman I was calling on, I hope you don't mind me sharing his name, Ron Foster, the purchasing agent there for the company where you work. He and I got to talking about faith, family, his choice, and what brought him to faith, which was an accident as, just after his college football career. He might have been an NFL star, or at least an NFL player, which is still something. Mm-hmm. And then you popped into his office, and we began to talk. And so your background. So anyway, that was how we met in discussing steel.
Yeah, and so just kind of give you a backstory of that. It's kind of interesting. Before I was working with this company a number of years before that time. With the economic downturn, I had to leave because of, there was laying people off. Mm-hmm. I came back 4 years later. Well, the place I was working at before was teaching. I was a high school teacher in science and technology. Mm-hmm. And for reasons that were outside of my control, I had to move on. I had to put my resignation in. it was kind of a hard thing for me to do, but God was pushing me in a different direction. I mean, pretty forcefully pushing me too. And so I was kind of out of a job for about 3 months there. And I happened to swing by my old company that I was working with before. And it just so happened that they fired the guy that took my old job. And the HR lady's like, put your resume in. A week later, I had my old job back. Now, okay, so there's some things going on here. If I did not leave that year, I would not be working where I'm working now. Leave school, teaching school that year. If I did not pop into the office that week, it's been more likely that someone else would have got my position. And the third thing is, I would never have been able to meet the man that you mentioned before, Ron Foster. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where I wanted to go next, is that we met, but after that story, when we met, you and I met, Ron left about maybe a half a year later.
Okay.
So he's not there anymore. But in the meantime, I met his brother. His name is Ryan. And Ron and I would talk at work once in a while about different topics, including apologetics. And I told him that I'd like to start a group for apologetics, maybe even on a campus. And I found a group called Ratio Christi on a college campus nearby where we live. And his brother, in the meantime, was wanting to get into college ministry. And so Ron reached out to his brother Ryan, and Ryan was like, no, this is not for me. I don't like it, and all that stuff. Well, he looked into it and he was like, yeah, I think I could do this. And so in the last 3 years now, Ryan has been leading this college ministry called Ratio Christi at the local college, Bradley University.
Oh, really? Okay.
And yeah, and so without those specific things happening in different people's lives, we would not have this group going with Ryan being the leader there. Huh. So as I look back and see God's hand in it all. So that's my story about how I kind of got into more the college side of it. But in the meantime, I already had started iApologia. So
kind of a soft spot in my heart for Bradley University. I worked on the air and radio in Peoria right out of college.
Okay.
I went to school just up the road from Peoria in Galesburg at Knox College, small liberal arts school.
Really?
And went to work in radio in Peoria just after college. Started there in 1984.
Wow.
I was there from 84 to 86. The funny thing is, the station where I was on the air, 93.3, is today it's playing the same songs that we played when I was on the air back in the mid-'80s, 30 years ago. And
wow.
The songs that were on the air then are now being called classics. So that gives you an idea of where I fall age-wise. And by the way, Scott Wheeler, who was on the air recently at the Christian station there in Peoria, was a fellow that I worked with back in the day.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. So
that's a small world.
Yeah, it is. He stuck around, and so anyway, yeah, I'm kind of following I was there back in 85 where they had that fantastic season with Jim Les and Hersey Hawkins on the team with the 32-3 season or something like that, and so I kind of still follow the Bradley Braves basketball team. Again, kind of a soft spot in my heart, but it was fun when I had to go back to the Peoria area on sales calls. Because again, it was a place that I knew back in the day. Although things have changed quite a bit since then. And and again, in calling on your firm there just outside Peoria was an interesting meeting. And even though our meeting there was just very brief, I appreciate your newsletter. And again, because apologetics was so important to me at a key point in my life. Our daughter was young, about 6 years old, and I was, for a time, at that particular time, I was Mr. Mom. And had to admit to myself, I couldn't explain to our daughter why certain things were right and others were wrong, because I didn't know why I believed certain things were right and wrong. Had been raised going to church every Sunday, fell away in college, of course, as many people do, many kids do, and never really came back in a serious way. And so that's what led me to apologetics. Now, let's talk about that topic, because the name apologetics almost sounds like people who are designated to go out and say they're sorry for, fundamentalists or something. What is apologetics and what is it not?
Yeah, so apologetics, yes, like you're right, it's not apologizing at all. And nor is it, some people, the first thing that comes to their mind is that it's a debate or fighting or something like that. And it's not that either. At least it shouldn't be. If it is, it's not the right spirit. Rather, it's making a case for the Christian worldview or making a case for Christ. And as believers, we're all called to do this. A number of places in the scriptures, whether it's to have reasons or be ambassadors or be advocates for the Christian worldview. I mean, so many times, like I noted before, I'm on the college campus a lot, and a lot of times you hear rebuttals against Christianity, like the Bible's fiction, or abortion is a woman's right, or Christianity is a logical fallacy. I've heard that before. Jesus never existed. Science disproves God. I mean, I could go on and on. There's lots of these types of things, the problem of pain and suffering, and all these types of issues that are tough issues that as Christians we should have answers for. And that's what the world of apologetics is pretty much all about. So many times I hear fellow Christians, though, tell me like, but Daniel, I'm not interested in it. I'm not interested in apologetics. And I do empathize with that because there's a lot of topics I'm not interested in as well. But I guess for me, it's not really up to my interest or not. It's kind of what we're called to, at least partially as Christians, to have answers. I've heard other people say, well, I don't need reasons, I just believe. And that's amazing, and I applaud them for that. But my thought on that is it's not just about us. It's not just about you. It's about other people. It's about our kids or grandkids or neighbors or coworkers or college students or whatnot. And then the last objection I hear people say is, people are not brought to Christ through reason, rather through faith. And that's somewhat true. Obviously, we're emotional beings, and we do need to go through Christ through faith. But as you said about your testimony, definitely that those reasons are the other side of the same coin as faith. So it goes really well together with faith and reason.
Well, it's God speaking through Isaiah, who said, "Come, let us reason together." Exactly. Jesus, who told us we are to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, all of our soul, and all of our mind. So it's a three-legged stool there. If you kick out one of those legs, it falls over.
Yes, very much so. Just like many things in the Christian faith are like that. So what was it that attracted you to the study of apologetics? Well, I don't know if anything specific. There's a number of things over my life. When I was younger, when I was a teenager, I'm more of the analytical type of person. I enjoyed science growing up, and so that's kind of my world of study is science and technology and design. And so with that background, with those interests, there's tons of different items in the world of Christianity, the Bible, and all that stuff that requires the use of your mind. And so that was always my natural tendency to be a thinker and things like that. And then I enjoyed science, and obviously with the Darwinian enterprise, we have a lot of objections to Christianity. So that was really my forte as well.
Well, now you mentioned a background in biology, which is interesting because Sharon is a degree in molecular biology, emphasis in genetics. So, yes. I had early in our marriage, and she will tell you this, an interesting discussion. Discussion was my word for it. Argument would be her word for it, and actually she's correct. I enjoy a good. I'm like the guy in that Monty Python sketch who shows up and wants to pay $5 for an argument.
Exactly. Yep.
And that's not always the best way to maintain a good, healthy, loving marital relationship. So, but we had a discussion early on because I was convinced that there was no contradiction, no mutual exclusivity between Darwinian evolution and the Christian faith. And there are some who still will make that case today. I respectfully disagree, because if you don't have the foundation of a fall from some original perfect state, then there's, where's the need for salvation? How does that enter the picture then? But anyway, your background in biology then is intriguing. What do you see in the field of biology, in the design of these wonderful bioelectrical mechanical devices that walk all over, fly all over, swim all over this planet that convinces you of a creator.
Yeah, I think the slam dunk argument is something that we find now in genetics and molecular biology, as your wife's background, and that is the DNA molecule along with other information carriers in the cell. I think this is the argument. I mean, I have not heard a good rebuttal against it, even though people have tried. The argument is simply this, is that DNA and RNA and some of these other information carrying molecules within every one of our bodies and all life on planet Earth, it looks very much like the information we produce, whether it's the written text on a page, the music score. We could talk about computer language. This is the same type of language. It carries information. We know where information comes from, always. There's only one source of information, and that's through intelligent beings. There's no other way that we can get functional, meaningful information. And that points to a creator, I think. It's just a slam dunk argument. Now, then you noted also the designs in biology as well, and I do think that's a huge area as well. And I think this is connected. The designs in biology are predicated upon the information within the DNA and within the cell. So there's a number of different thoughts on that, but one of the ones that stick out to me as being quite interesting is that in the world of biology, we can find these amazing structures that either look like our designs and we never copied them, or that when we want to make something in the world of engineering and design, we go and copy them because they're much better designs than what we can do. An example of this is something that we never copied, but it's exactly the same as our design, would be a biological gear. There's an insect in England that is a leafhopper that has these gears on its back legs, and these gears allow the back legs to be synchronized. And if it was not synchronized, this leafhopper would spin out of control and fall and it'd be dead.
Yeah.
So what this is, we never copied it. It was there before we copied it. But then there's other things that we find in biology that we're like, wow, we could use that, whether it's some sort of shark skin that has some sort of antimicrobial properties that we try to copy and make surfaces that have those same properties. Yes, silk, yeah. So we can go on and on with those types of things where there's designs in biology that either and here's another thing too, is that even if we mimic those designs are usually like 99% of the time better than our designs. They're more efficient, more economically made, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, the thing that really blew my mind was it last year or the year before, where a couple of Chinese, and I don't know what their discipline was, but they wrote a paper in which they were talking about attempts to replicate robotic hands, and they just said that the design of the human hand is so intricate that we've not been able to replicate it, and they were forced to retract their paper and rewrite it to remove the reference to design, because design implies a designer. Actually requires a designer.
Exactly.
And the paper wouldn't have been published if they had alluded to the human being, the human form, having an external designer. So yeah, you're right. Exactly. It is incredible when you look at it from that respect, and yet science, it just, like Pee Wee Herman wants to put its hands over its ears and go la 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 la.
Yeah,
it's amazing. Well, let me come back to a question here, because you alluded, or you gave several examples of objections to people who find the subject of apologetics maybe daunting.
Yeah.
And again, from my own journey, the thing that really moved me to begin looking into it was responsibility as a parent, knowing that suddenly it was on me to try to explain right and wrong to our daughter, and knowing that my own personality is such that because I said so wasn't a good enough answer. That's what led me into the study of apologetics. It was actually the story of James and the account of his martyrdom by Josephus that cinched the deal for me.
Really?
As parents, what would you say to parents or grandparents, just to persuade, or maybe parents specifically, to persuade them of the importance of apologetics for their children?
Yeah. Well, let me be upfront here. They say those who are unmarried and don't have any kids are the best parents. And I'm unmarried and I don't have any kids. So I'm not going to speak to that specifically, but I'm going to speak to it generally, why it's so important. I think, just like what you were talking about your experience going to college, that you walked away from the faith.
Yeah.
And my guess is a lot of those reasons were not just rational reasons, but rather emotional reasons. If you think back on them, there are desires that you had, whether it's friendships, social interactions, the sin issue, just worldview challenges that you dealt with.
It didn't seem that important to me. I mean, it didn't seem that important to me. You know, church to me at that time in my life was a place you went to learn good moral behavior, and that was about it. The whole the immediacy of hey, this is a question that has eternal consequences just didn't really enter my mind.
Exactly. And that's another very good one. And so when kids go off on their own to college or to the workforce or to even high school, or even grade school nowadays, and if they don't have that solid foundation for what is truth, what is actually what the Bible teaches, and the core teaching of the Bible, where we did fall as people, and that God is the creator, we have the responsibility to obey God, and that what the work of the cross was all about, and the issue of heaven and hell. If they don't have those as a foundation and have the reasons, not just knowing that, but also know the reasons why we believe what we believe, it gives you really no foundation, and you go to school like, I don't know what I believe, I don't really care. Who cares? They lose interest.
Yeah, and if there's no good reason to believe that the Bible is actually the word of the entity who created everything, then what makes that advice any better than guidance from Dr. Phil?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's another thing too, right along with that, is that if you look at a lot of these other big, I'm going to say worldviews, and a worldview is just how we look at the world. If you look at other worldviews, such as, you can talk about Marxism, you can talk about New Ageism, we could talk about Islam, many other types of worldviews out there. They have some truth to them, but in the big scope of it, there's problems with the worldview. With Christianity, there doesn't seem to be those problems. It seems to match the picture that the Bible gives for the world around us seems to match like really, really, really well with the actual world. It tells the condition of our soul. It tells the condition of what's going on, and a fix, and the fix really does work. And it gives so much explanation that really makes sense. Like atheism, we cannot explain morality. Well, why should you be moral if you're an atheist? You know, who cares? You're just a bag of chemicals bumping against another bag of chemicals, and if someone kills you or you kill someone else, who cares? You know. But
if there are no eternal consequences to your actions, then the only way to win as an atheist is to exit this world with more stuff than everybody else. There are no moral constraints because there are no eternal consequences. Right. I mean, hey, if I don't have to answer to an eternal judge, do unto others and do it quick before they can do it to you.
Exactly. Very much so. So yeah, without that grounding, without that foundation with a lawgiver, you are pretty much out free floating through the air with no grounding whatsoever.
Yeah, feet firmly planted in midair. Well, you've moved the conversation in a way that I would hope to do anyway. And in the interest of trying to keep these programs to a manageable length, I think this is a good way to kind of swing into the final leg of the conversation here to get a little more specific. And we'll talk in just a bit here about some good resources. Of course, iapologia.com, of course, being one of them. But you mentioned that the Christian worldview explains the world around us, and there are times when the world around us seems to make no sense. And one of those times was a Wednesday just a couple of weeks ago in Parkland, Florida, at Stoneman Douglas High School, when a young man, 19 years old, allegedly, walked into school with an AR-15 and took the lives of 17 people. And we've seen, as we've seen in other recent incidents like this, the Las Vegas shooting, for one, a backlash against public expressions of faith. You know, our thoughts and prayers are with the families of those in Florida. And suddenly social media erupts with anger. Neil deGrasse Tyson, the renowned astrophysicist, recently tweeted something that I thought was just the height of insensitivity and also smugness, because he wasn't making a point about the gun control issue. He was making a point about faith, in which he tweeted something to the effect of research collected over many years and from many different places proves conclusively that prayers are ineffective at stopping bullets from killing children. Well, yeah, no kidding, Neil. But the bigger point there, I think, that he's making, which is one that is the point that's behind this pushback against praying for the families of the grieving families of the victims and the friends of the victims, is why would a loving God do something like this? How does a Christian worldview explain that?
Yeah, and it's not just that. I mean, that's huge. I mean, this story that just happened is very big, but it's also, I mean, think about a situation where you have a parent sitting at the bedside of his or her dying child. Right. I mean, where's God in that situation? Or what about the things that happened under the communist totalitarian regimes or Hitler? I mean, where was God, and why didn't God stop him? We could talk about did God create evil? And if he knew, and if he did or didn't, that's one issue. But how about this? Did he know that evil was going to exist? If he did, then why did he create people that we could experience it? So it seems to be a big hammer against God, or a big argument against God. And it is a very powerful one, especially emotionally. It's a very powerful concern that people really do have in today's day and age. Mm-hmm. And I think that we need to take this seriously, because you can think of this issue in two different directions. One is more the pastoral sense, and one is more in the philosophical sense. When I'm saying pastoral, I'm talking more about the friendship, the counseling, the pastor type of situation where you have to comfort someone who's going through a painful situation. So we need someone to help carry us through these types of situations. We can talk about the shootings. We can talk about hostages, like let's say a terrorist has some hostages. Here's some situations that I want to connect with people, because we all have pain and suffering in our lives. Yes. Like I have a nephew with Downs. I have a sister-in-law and some of her kids who have some very serious food allergies. My brother and his wife just had $1,000 stolen from them. I have a uncle who just died like 6 months ago. I had a friend who just died 3 months ago. He was about my age. Both of them have cancer. Right now, as I'm speaking, my dad's dying at home of cancer. So we know that pain, disease, disaster is all around us. And this is where I wanted to say is that, no, I never have been in a situation at the bedside of my dying child, or seeing the death of my spouse or something like that. But we all have experienced this to some extent. And I think that empathy that each one of us can carry to a situation is very important, and that takes precedence over the philosophical arguments. And I think along with this whole pastoral thing is that I think the Christian worldview gives an ultimate example of someone who really understands what we are going through, and that happens to be the founder of Christianity himself, Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you think of what Jesus went through, the torture, the pain, the rebuff, the people making fun of him and spitting at him, being whipped, and you name it, and then dying on the cross. He's been through the pain, whether emotionally and physically, even to the point of death. And so that's the reason why he can understand our suffering. He can empathize with us. We can reach out to him as being someone that we can really put our faith in and connect with. But on the other hand, I do think that we need that solid grounding, that philosophical grounding, though, especially when things are going better for us, that give us that framework so that we're not sidelined in those situations where there is disaster. And that's where I think what I would like to kind of move into right now is more of the philosophical reasons why Christianity and evil and pain and suffering are not at odds with each other.
Yeah. It seems to me that there is an inextricable link between the creation of free will and the existence of evil. God created not just humans, but as we're told by the Apostle Paul, principalities, powers, rulers of spiritual darkness. The Bible makes it clear that it's not just Satan and a few demons. There are a number of entities. The book of Revelation, a third of the angels, apparently, who chose to rebel. And if you accept the Genesis 6 paradigm, Genesis 6 verses 1 through 4, you had sons of God who saw that the daughters of men were fair. They're referred to in Peter and Jude, and apparently they're waiting judgment in darkness and in chains at the moment. But the point is that they exercised free will as well. And it seems to me, Daniel, that the only way to have eliminated evil from the world, I mean, as Jesus said, the poor you will always have with you. When I was young, I used to think, well, gosh, that's a pessimistic view. Well, no, it's a perceptive view, because Jesus understood the condition of the human heart. There will always be those who exploit others. And because God, for his pleasure, chose to create us with the freedom to choose rather than creating happy little automatons who were compelled to love him without any choice. And because he allows us to act on our free will without stepping in and preventing us from doing anything that would ever hurt anyone else, that's why we have sin and suffering in this world. And
I mean, you cannot force someone to love you. And as soon as you do that, you just have a machine.
Right.
And if you just have a machine, then so if you have to have love, you have to have that ability for that person not to love or to hate and to be evil.
Right.
So that free will is so important for that. And obviously God wanted that relationship with humans, and he wanted them to choose him and not choose the other side.
Right. And
so yes, that's one of the most powerful, that's one of the main points, reasons why pain and suffering and evil are not incompatible with Christianity, actually very compatible.
Yeah.
But I think there's other ones as well. I mean, you can think of how would we know what evil really was unless we had a true standard of goodness? If I didn't have a ruler that told me how long a foot is, how would I know if my distance I was measuring was a foot or not? So we have a standard of goodness out there, and that standard is what the Christian worldview would say God is a standard of goodness. And so God provides this stable backdrop that we can, look at and say this is good, and any deviation from that is evil. We could never say that rape or theft or torturing babies for the fun of it was evil without that standard of goodness and holiness that we have. And like I noted before, that Darwinian evolution really can't give us that framework, because we're just a bunch of bags of chemicals bumping against each other. And if we want to hurt someone else, well, there's no moral standard for that. It's just fine.
It's me trying to make sure that my DNA is propagated to the next generation at the expense of his.
Exactly. So whatever you want to do, it's free reign, even though most fortunately do not live that way.
Correct, right. The irony, of course, is that atheists don't recognize that they're just appropriating Christian morality.
Yep, they've stolen the Christian parts of the Christian worldview to live life better. So definitely that's very important for that. But I think that there's other reasons as well. I mean, I think one issue is that people say, well, why would God allow, let's say, Hitler to keep going on? Or why did God allow the shooter to keep shooting?
Right.
And that's a very serious question, and it's a perplexing question on one end. But on the other end is we have to remember that we too, each one of us, are not perfect either. all of us have sinned. The Bible says all of us have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And when we start understanding that we too have stolen stuff in our life, we have lied, we have lusted, we fight, we don't love God with all our heart, then all of a sudden we see who we really are. And if God would just strike anybody down dead who is doing something wrong, well, guess what? We would be not here either. But God has mercy on us and allows us to do that. And that goes back to free will, definitely. But I think another thing about this whole free will thing, too, is that back in the biblical story of the Garden of Eden, the first parents, the sin, when they sinned against God and disobeyed what God said, it had a rippling effect throughout the whole world, or throughout the rest of humanity, their progeny. And that's the suffering and the disease that we see today is caused by that to some extent, and it's traced back to that original sin. And so that's one of the things that concerns me a little bit when people say, like, well, it's just my decision, or it's my choice, or it's just consenting adults. Well, yeah, but it does have a rippling effect to the rest of society. Other people are affected by your sin or my sin, and I think that's very important for us to realize that.
Well, and as God said to Job, where were you when I laid the foundations of the universe? He is the designer, and it is his standard of morality. And without that external standard of morality, by an objective, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient deity,
exactly,
there are no restraints on human behavior. And
that's interesting you bring that up, because the Job issue, because that's exactly what I was going to say next, is that I think sometimes God has a bigger plan for us too.
Right.
For example, the story I gave you at the very beginning about my experience with the Rasher Christie and with going back to my old job and leaving the school. There was some suffering on my end because I really enjoyed my job, what I was doing. But on the other hand, looking back at that situation, I can see God's hand in that whole situation, even though there was some pain on my end. Even today, with the different situations in my life or your life, right now we don't understand why we have this pain or suffering, or why we're going through this relationship issue, or why we're getting sick or whatever. And I think that's what Job was going through. Job was like, why, God? I mean, what's going on? Or Lazarus, when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, his sisters were like, well, if you would have been here. But I think Jesus said something to the fact that this happened so that others would see. I mean, this is to show God's glory.
Yeah.
I mean, show God's power. So God had bigger purpose in this. And I think when we start realizing that God is much more knowledgeable about, let me back up. God is ultimate in his knowledge. He knows everything, and we don't. And as soon as we realize that, I think we should step back and have a little more humility.
Yeah.
And even though it's hard, me first, that maybe God has a bigger plan for us.
Yeah.
So I think that's huge. And I'm glad you brought up that whole thing with Job there.
If we could completely understand God, he'd be a pretty small God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. He would be much bigger than us.
Daniel, I know that you go out and you speak and give talks on a variety of topics. I want to give people an opportunity, if they're interested in having you speak to a church group, or let me ask you this: what kind of groups do you speak to, and on what topics, and how would people contact you if they're interested?
Yeah, so you're breaking up here a little bit, but let's see. Hopefully, I come through clearly here. So I speak on a number of different topics. One of the topics I speak on is science and the Bible, and is there a conflict between those? That's kind of my background. But I do speak on worldview issues as well. Like this spring, I'll be talking to a number of different organizations, especially homeschool groups and college groups. I'm working with another group where we'll be talking about science and the Bible as well. But a lot of people are interested in the worldview and about deception and about how do we protect it against these bad ideas in society. So that's where I speak about that. One place that I can go to, and the easiest place they can go to get some of my resources or get connected with me, is to my website. That will be in the show notes here. and contact me there, because I have on the speaking page, I have some links to contact me, and they can just go in there and shoot me a quick email through that website.
Okay. And it's on science issues, the Bible and science, equipping your family, social issues in Christianity, and things like that. Daniel Corrier his ministry is iapologia.com, and again, the link to the website will be in the show notes. And Daniel, I think we may have been blessed in the connection here. We live so far out in the country that our internet connection comes and goes, and I think we've been protected thus far, so let's not push a good thing. I know this is only scratching the surface of a topic that scholars will dedicate their entire lives to, but again, an important topic, and especially one in the wake of tragedy. And so I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule today to talk, and I hope we can do it again.
Well, I appreciate that, Derek. I really enjoyed this discussion, and thank you for all that you do as well. So, and I hope that we can connect again as well.
Again, Daniel's website is iapologia.com, but if you can't spell that, don't worry about it. It's in the show notes, vftb.net. It's below this video at youtube.com/Derek Gilbert, and you'll also find this at Spreaker, because we're now posting these via Spreaker as well, Spreaker.com, and you'll find all of our videos there. But again, VFTB.net, check the show notes, and you'll have links to all of those. Just a couple of things to touch on here as we continue watching the ripples spreading out from the horrific attack at Stoneman Douglas High School on Valentine's Day. 17 people died, of course, and in the spirit of never letting a good tragedy go to waste, we're seeing anti-gun activists really making hay of what happened on that day. In fact, it's been kind of remarkable for those of us not accustomed to seeing this sort of thing play out, watching the students from Stoneman Douglas High School in front of the camera and remarking, gee, they seem really well-spoken. Wow, these students are really have something important to say, and aren't they well-spoken and eloquent in their passion for expressing their belief that something needs to be done to corral the use and ownership of guns in America to prevent another tragedy like this. Well, a couple of weeks into this process, reporters for BuzzFeed, which is not a conservative news outlet. Remember, BuzzFeed is the one news organization that chose to publicize that spurious and uncorroborated dossier that alleged some really disgusting behavior on the part of Donald Trump in Moscow years ago. So BuzzFeed, no friend to conservatives or people of conservative beliefs, but they did some good reporting here on February 27th. A story titled "The Parkland Teens," Parkland, Florida, of course, is where Stoneman Douglas High School is located. "The Parkland teens fighting for gun control have the backing of these huge organizing groups." Now, suddenly, the ability of these students to get in front of cameras, to get in, to get booked on major network television news and talk programs is a little easier to understand. The reporters Brianna Sachs and Marianne Georgentopoulos deserve some credit for this. But the question, of course, is why did it take 2 weeks for the media to notice that suddenly some very big money operators had swooped in on the students in Parkland, Florida, to put them out in front of their movement? Because that's what's happening here. It's as though the anti-gun activists have realized, after the horrible, horrible deaths in Las Vegas, that exploiting the dead wasn't working. And what they needed to do was exploit the survivors of a gun tragedy. Because that's what's happening here. Now, you can't blame the students. They're 16, 17, 18 years old. They've seen friends, classmates, shot dead in close proximity, in a place that they felt safe, a place they go every day, 5 days a week. So you can understand their reaction to this. They're young, and who knows, even at my age 56, seeing somebody shot dead in the hallway of a place where I go 5 days a week might have a profound impact on me. But they're young enough and idealistic enough, perhaps naive enough, not to know that some of these players have who are befriending them and offering them support, financial and otherwise, are maybe have another agenda in mind. Some of the groups identified as behind this movement now to use the Parkland students to push the anti-gun agenda. Every Town for Gun Safety, which is a mainly Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York. Bloomberg bankrolls the organization, but they recently got a $1 million donation from another entrepreneur named Eli Broad. Giffords, which is an anti-gun movement that sprang up after former Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords of Arizona was very nearly killed by a young man. Move On, of course, MoveOn.org is part of this. Women's March LA, also a part of this. Planned Parenthood, spokesperson for Planned Parenthood contacted by BuzzFeed, said they hadn't been directly in touch with the students, but they had offered support to Giffords, that's the Gabrielle Giffords organization, which is spearheading the national coalition of groups working on this rally that is, we're told, is the product of these students, the effort of these remarkable students from Stoneman Douglas High School. March for Our Lives, which is scheduled for March 24th. And forgive me, I don't mean to sound snarky about the students again. Really cannot blame them for being passionate about what's going on here. For them, this is a shock. For them, this is probably, for most of them, their first experience with the death of somebody close to them. Toward the bottom of the article, we also learned that the Democratic U.S. Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who's lived in Broward County for 30 years, reached out to the students within a couple of days, the day after the shooting, in fact, and helped them get in touch with state legislators in Florida, planned their trip to Tallahassee to address the state legislature. So Debbie Wasserman Schultz, involved in coordinating the what we're told is a grassroots movement, but to be perfectly honest here, this is the very definition of astroturfed. George Clooney and Oprah Winfrey have each donated $500,000 to help make this March for Our Lives a reality. Look, again, with all due respect to these young people, when I was in high school, I was a very well-spoken young man. Did very well in the high school debate team, qualified for the Illinois State Championship Tournament 2 years running. Did well in radio speaking, which had, obviously led to kind of telegraphed my later career, why I basically have talked for a living my entire adult life. Had a lot of smart friends who were also well-spoken and good in front of a crowd or good in front of a camera. But I can guarantee you that we would have had no clue without outside help, and that's the key, without outside help, of how to attract six-figure donations from Hollywood celebrities. The Parkland teens have had their cause appropriated by anti-gun activists, and they are being put out in front of this parade because they're sympathetic. They're sympathetic faces. It is more difficult for people who believe in the Second Amendment to reject out of hand the message when it's coming from a 16-year-old who just saw her best friend shot dead a couple of weeks ago. I mean, that may sound callous, but frankly, that's what's happening here. These students are being, exploited by the anti-gun movement. And it explains why and how these students were able to put together such a remarkable event and a movement that has gone national in such a short period of time. It's because professional organizers have jumped on board, and made them the face of the movement. We are looking at, as of this past Tuesday, close to $3 million being raised for this movement so far. March for Our Lives, tentatively scheduled for March 24th. They were hoping to have it on the National Mall, but it's reported this weekend that they're having to look for another location because a student group filming a talent show already had a permit to use the National Mall on March 24th. Lyft, which is the ride-sharing app competitor to Uber, Lyft says it will offer free rides to the march on March 24th. So again, this is the kind of thing that doesn't get organized by a group of high school students with no real life experience. This is the kind of thing that requires pre-planning and legwork. Phone calls about things like this had already been done prior to what happened on February 14th. And so what we're seeing is, again, not a grassroots movement. What we're seeing is an AstroTurf movement where the students from Stoneman Douglas High School, survivors of a horrific event that I pray you, me, no one that I know ever has to endure. And they're being used as the face of this organization and the face of this movement. It has come out, by the way, that a legislator in Florida, the state senator Lauren Book, who had access to the police reports of what happened at Stoneman Douglas High School, that Nicholas Cruz, the alleged shooter, did not use high-capacity magazines in his AR-15. He had magazines that held 10 rounds only, and his gun, jammed, still had about 180 rounds left, according to one report. And that's when he threw his gun away. It could have been much, much worse. I mean, it was horrific enough as it was, but it could have been much, much worse had the gun not jammed. But this call now from anti-gun activists to pass legislation restricting the size of magazines would have had no impact on what happened on Valentine's Day in Florida. And in fact, the legislature in Florida shot down an amendment Monday, and pardon the use of the pun, I'm just quoting the report from the New York Post here. They rejected an amendment Monday that would have banned semi-automatic assault weapons like the AR-15, but they did agree to raise the legal age to purchasing a firearm like that to 21. But they also approved legislation that would give teachers the right to carry guns in school. So as a sheriff from, and I'm forgetting the county in Ohio now, but a sheriff in Ohio has offered training to students, or rather to teachers in Ohio, which of course is subject to their school districts allowing them to actually carry firearms in school. But he said, look, the real solution here is to make schools hardened targets so that we're not looking at a free fire zone for bad people who want to come in and cause harm. One final note on this. It appears that changes in the way student misbehavior is treated across America, and specifically in Broward and Miami-Dade, which is next door, may have played a role in what happened on February 14th. But across the country, going back to early 2014, when the Obama administration, the Departments of Justice and Education, issued guidance in the form of a Dear Colleague letter, which is sort of a strong-arm tactic sent out to school administrators saying, if you want your federal funding, you'll play ball, advised school districts around the country that they needed to reduce the rate at which minority students were suspended because it was affecting their ability to get an education. Well, school districts complied. We saw over the last few years the rates at which minority students are suspended drop significantly. But the net result, of course, is that now they knew that they're not going to be sent home or sent to the police for even getting violent or physical with teachers. And so what happens to the students who are there to get an education? Now they're in an unsafe situation, fearful for their own safety. Teachers are fearful for their own safety because there are no consequences anymore. This is really unacceptable. Now, how much of a role it played in this specific case, we don't know. The other, of course, the other aspect of this story that's not really being publicized is the link between fatherlessness and violent outbursts like this, violent shootings. The vast majority of mass shootings in the United States over the last decade or so, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but Nicholas Cruz, even the Las Vegas shooter, Sandy Hook, Elliot Rodger in California, came out of homes where there was no father. This is not something that we're supposed to talk about in modern America. And I think it's past time that we do. Have to do more research on that. That may be something Sharon and I discuss on PID radio, but that is a common thread among these shooters. I did deal with it briefly on Skywatch TV this past week, but yeah, it is a perfect storm of factors coming together. There's no one thing that contributes to it. And of course, at the end of the day, the ultimate underlying factor is sin, condition of the human heart. When we don't take the supernatural realm seriously, and the fact that the principalities, powers, rulers of spiritual darkness want to destroy us and everything that we love, then events like what happened on Valentine's Day will continue to occur and will continue to puzzle us because we can't make any sense out of it. Because from a human perspective, it makes no sense. But the Christian worldview explains it. The human heart is wicked by nature. That's our default setting. The spirit realm is real. It is populated by entities, many of whom are unfriendly, in fact, in open rebellion to their creator. And they are more than happy to take us with them to their final address, which is the lake of fire. So, what do we do? Accept the Lord Jesus Christ as Savior, for one thing. You never know when something like this is going to intrude on your life or the lives of your loved ones. So the only thing you can do is to be prepared. And I'm not talking about exercising Second Amendment rights. I'm being prepared for eternity. That's first and foremost. Well, a couple of quick notes. Sharon's book, the new novel, The Blood is the Life, Book 3 of the Red Wing Saga, that is available now. It is in stock at the Skywatch TV store. And Tom Horn, God love him, is offering a crazy deal where you can buy all 3 novels in the Red Wing Saga, Blood Lies, Blood Rights, and The Blood is the Life, plus Mike Heiser's 2 novels, The Facade and The Portent, for a donation of $40. Sold individually, the 5 novels, $90. Get them all for $40 at skywatchtvstore.com. That's skywatchtvstore.com. And I'll put a link in the notes here at vftb.net. Here, the Watchman Dallas, the conference coming to the Hilton DFW Lakes Conference Center, March 22nd through the 25th. It's just about sold out. I know that the hotel, the Hilton, is booked for the conference. They're now directing overflow to the Super 8 in Grapevine, Texas, which is close by. But you can still watch the video feed. The video coming to you in HD and about an hour after each presentation, because they record them first and upload them to the web. That way, there's no problem with the internet stream suddenly getting interrupted. So you're getting it on a little bit of a time delay, but you get to watch them for up to 6 months after the conference. Reasonable price, $49, but save 20% off that with the promo code Gilbert20. That's Gilbert20 at hearthewatchmen.com. We are no doubt in the transhuman age, the age of hybrids. This is coming. Not only the tech center, tech centers of the world, but to academia pushing for the merging of our biology, human biology, with artificial intelligence, robotics, nanotechnology, and that will be the theme of the True Legends Conference coming to Branson in September. That's the 14th through the 16th. Steve Quayle, Tom Horn, Sharon K. Gilbert, leading speakers, along with Dr. Hugo de Garis, who's been a guest here on View from the Bunker. Again, this will be in Branson at the Mansion Theater, September 14th through the 16th of this year. Registrations are already going quickly, so don't wait. If you think this would be of interest to you, register now so you don't miss out, because once we are full, it is full. That theater has a very, let's just say the fire marshal in Branson does not look kindly on overfilling the theater, as in it's not going to happen. So gen6.com, GENSIX.com. Please take advantage of the free Bible study that Sharon and I put together every week. Now, we are now into the book of Ezekiel, which is going to get really, really interesting. We get that updated every Sunday, usually around midday, and all of the studies going back to Genesis 1, posted at gilberthouse.org. That is gilberthouse.org. Coming up on Skywatch TV this week, we continue our discussion with Donna Howell. She's the author of the new book, The Handmaid's Conspiracy. It raises a very interesting question. has the church derailed a women's empowerment movement that was started by Jesus Christ himself? You'll find a complete schedule of where and how to watch the program at skywatchtv.com. Please give us a review at Stitcher, iTunes, Spreaker, or wherever else fine podcasts are sold. And please give us a like at Facebook, facebook.com/View from the Bunker, which is a production of Gilbert House and released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. The opening theme is by Kevin MacLeod. His website is incompetech.com. Our opening announcer is DC Good. Remember, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.